All right, 11:30. Let's formally start this meeting. I want to start by acknowledging the First Nations people of this land, the original inhabitants, and thank them for their care of culture and country over many thousands of years. I am currently on Kaurna land, and proud to be so. So, this is a big day, really. One which most of you have been waiting for some time. So the most important person to be listening to is Frank. Have I got you, Frank? No? Okay, so one can only imagine what it's like, what it has been like to be working in the Australia Council over the last month or two.
Anne, I'm online. Can you hear me?
I can, Frank. That's terrific.
Okay.
So we can only imagine what it's been like to be working in the Australia Council. I'm sure it's been very tense and difficult for you. And today won't be the easiest day that you've had either. But in advance, I want to thank you for your courage, really, in fronting and being the face of the council at this really difficult moment. So best I just hand to you, Frank, and you tell us what you can tell us.
Okay. So I'll do a quick summary of the approach we've taken. And as I'm speaking, emails will be being sent out to people with notifications. So some of you may be getting them in your inbox now. Some of them may get them while I'm speaking. Some might get them after I've finished. So we have decided to try and work out what is the best way we can support as many organisations through what has become a very difficult situation given the whole impact of the pandemic and its unbelievable impact on the arts and creative sector and the society, community and the world as a whole. So what we have determined to do is two things. One is we have decided to go ahead with the decisions coming out of the 4-year funding process. However, the organisations that are successful in 4-year funding for 22 to 24, 21 to 24, in the first year of that arrangement will receive 70% roughly, of what they asked for and were successful for. And then in 22, 23, 24, will receive their full amounts. That allows us to then go to most of the current 4-year funded organisations and continue funding for them through 2021 at 70% of their current funding that they're receiving in 2020. That means we're able to, through the 4-year funding this transition arrangement, we'll be able to support 148 organisations to the end of 2021. That also means for some organisations who receive VAX money, that the VAX payments will stay in 2021 as they currently are in 2020. We have at the same time indicated we're going to set up a resilience program, and that resilience program, which will operate quickly, so to the end of June of this year. Applications will be online this afternoon. I can't give a precise time for that because, as you can imagine, we're actually working on finalising application forms, putting them online and all the stuff that needs to happen around that, but hopefully we'll have those online by 3 o'clock so people can start accessing that. Those applications, there's 3 streams to it, which is one which is called Survive, which is fundamentally a quick response program to help people through the immediate future. Another one which is called ADAPT, which is more around individuals and organisations that are not current recipients of multi-year funding to be able to, I suppose, re-engineer a bit what they're doing and refocus themselves to try and get through this period. And then a third one, which is CREATE, which is basically about people working on different ways of making work and possibly presenting work in this immediate future. And all of those will be fundamentally internally assessed. We might call in this industry advice where we think we need it, so that we can turn them around within a time frame range between 3 and 7 weeks is the time frame, depending on which stream we're looking at. That is being supported by obviously the suspension of the programs that I mentioned when I spoke to you all last time. The change around that is we have reinstituted the Arts and Disability Mentorship Program, but all the other programs are still suspended. That allows us to take all the uncommitted funds we have before the end of June 30 this year and try and put them out the door quickly through the Resilience Fund. Added to that is that we have had endorsement from the department and from the Minister's Office to repurpose government programs as well, funding. So things like Plain Australia and a whole range of others, funds that are uncommitted or are currently uncommitted in those programs, we'll be able to utilise through the Resilience Fund. That's fundamentally the first time we've ever, how can I say it, we've done that through, sorry, someone just sent me a text, that we've had that permission. So basically, if I go back to the start, what it means through the 4-year funding program is that we'll be supporting from 2022 onwards, 95 organisations, which is a reduction from the current 124. But that also means that we'll be investing close to $3 million more in our 4-year funding program, because obviously we increased the range that people could apply for 4-year funding from now on, and going forward. And that was to deal with a whole range of changed funding circumstances across fundamentally the Commonwealth and the states. So that's where we're at with all that. In terms of individual feedback for the outcomes of the 4-year funding process, we'll obviously provide that individual feedback. We won't actually be able to activate that until next week, as you can imagine. But in particular, arts practice directors will be there for people to receive feedback and have conversations with. And there's the usual online process around that as well, inquiry process. I thank Anne for the way she did the introduction, but as for a lot of you on listening to me now, my view of the world has always been, no matter how complex and difficult it might get for someone working at the Australia Council, it is nowhere near the difficulty, complexity and challenges faced by people who actually deliver work on a day-to-day basis out in the sector. And so, this is not an easy time for the sector as a whole, and for not just the 4-year funded organisations that are currently getting notifications, but for all those independent freelancers and community-based work that happens out there that are all suffering. One last thing I would like to say, and then I'm more than happy to take questions, is the delay in making the notifications around 4-year funding was fundamentally around trying to get a line of sight on the whole of economy packages that the government was, sorry, I just lost my screen. If the whole of government programs, sorry people, I just need to do something very quickly. on my computer to get some emails out. Yeah. Sorry. The whole government programs like JobKeeper, JobSeeker, to see whether they would have some impact on the way that we were configuring the 4-year funding program. And so after we did that analysis, we went with what was a plan that we had in place at the start, which was the 70% transition year in 2021. So that's where we're fundamentally at. I'm more than happy to take questions now.
Okay, just before you start on the questions, Frank, I want to make sure that just that you're clear, because you've got so much going on, that we would really like you to thank the staff in the Australia Council and make sure they know we appreciate it, and also the peers who have worked really hard to try and get us to where we are now. Now, to everybody, if you want to ask a question, I just need some help. There's about 90 people on this call. If you want to ask a question, please indicate in chat that you want to ask a question, and find the raise hand function, which you'll find if you press participants. And then when you have asked your question, can you take the raised hand function off so that I can see where we're going and how many people we've got left? Okay, who's starting? We've got anybody indicating they want to ask a question? That's unbelievable, Frank.
No one has a question.
Oh, well, just hang on. Just give people a...
Yeah.
Frank, could you go over the bit again about what the plans are for the funding for the companies in that first year? You said about 70% for companies in that first year. And is your intention that some of that money is coming into the Resilience Fund to support independent artists, or how have you thought about that?
So the question goes, the way it's set up is this, is so for the successful organisations, that we've just gone through the assessment of for 21-24, in 2021, in the main they'll be getting 70% of what they applied for, we were successful for, right? Then those funds that liberates allows us to offer 70% funding in 2021 to all the current 4-year funded organisations that have been unsuccessful with applications 21-24. Of course, all of that money comes out of next financial year. The Resilience Fund is fundamentally coming out of this financial year's budget. So it actually doesn't impact on the monies going to the organisations in 2021. So that resilience money is coming out of this financial year of all uncommitted funds.
Okay, Lynn.
Thanks, Frank.
We'll come back to it, Frank. You might need to say it a few times, but Lyndall.
Sorry.
Yep.
Just a very simple question. You listed the 3 types of resilience program funding. Can you just explain the first one a little bit more? I didn't quite catch that.
Sure. Survive is quick response, immediate funds, fundamentally to individuals and to some groups and some organisations, but fundamentally for individuals and groups who will require some assistance, quick response assistance to get them over this current hump, and maybe before they might be able to access other sources of support.
Yep.
And that's
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Melissa.
Yeah, hi Frank, just a quick question around the resilience program, what you think the turnaround of decisions will be?
Depends on the stream. We think with the Survive stream, we think we should be able to turn that around between 2 and 4 weeks. It all depends. We're just working on how we can do that quickly.
Yeah.
The others might take a bit longer to process because they're a bit, they're for different kinds of projects and stuff. But we would aim to be able to turn everything around within 4 to 6 weeks at the most for those other streams as well. We'll try and do it as quick as we can, but as you'd appreciate, there is how can I put it? Things that have to be put in train and processes, but we'll aim to get them done as quick as we can.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Frank,
Right.
what sort of money are you thinking about for Survive?
The range that we've put in for Survive is, just let me check something so I don't give the wrong information because I've got so many things in my mind. It was 5 to 10, I think, but just let me double check. Yeah. Just do one thing. Sorry, people. I'll just let me double check that and I'll take another question.
Okay. John Davis.
Hey, John.
Hey, Frank. Thank you, Anne. And I'm speaking from Awabakal land in Lake Macquarie, Australian Music Centre. Frank, you mentioned twice 2 numbers regarding the organisations being supported. Once you said 95, you said another figure of 148.
Yeah.
Can we get a sense of the scale of the fallout, please? Just so we understand the success rate and where the gaps are going to be when it comes to the infrastructure support.
Sure. Well, the list of successful organisations will go up on our website this afternoon because the embargo we're putting on is a very short embargo. So I suppose in a general sense I can say this. So of the 95 organisations that were successful with applications to 4-year funding for 2021 to 2024, 67 of them are current 4-year funded organisations, and there are 28 new entrants. That means that there are roughly 57 current 4-year organisations that will not be receiving 4-year funding in 2021 to 2024. Yeah, that's spread across areas of practice and spread across, arts and service organisations. I don't have the figures absolutely in front of me at the moment, John, about service organisations, but the service organisations, their success rate through this process was commensurate with all the other success rates. But I'm not going to go into details about who's in and who's out at this stage because we're still notifying people, and I'm not going to talk about individual orgs that might be in or out, even though I know some of them, if you know what I mean.
Thanks, Frank. I know it's just about the sector more broadly and where the gaps are going to be. That's all, just to see what the scale of impact we're actually dealing with here. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No. Yeah.
Jen Gorzula.
Oh, hi, Frank. It's Jen from Arts Queensland.
Hey, Jen. How you doing?
Good. Just wanted to clarify, because I think I came in a bit late, the 3 streams in the Resilience Fund. One is Survive. What are the other 2?
Adapt and Create.
Adapt and Create. And do they all have the same level of, funding that they can apply for? Adapt and Create.
The amounts that they've got vary across across the 3 streams.
Right.
And the reason for that is because they're obviously trying to do different things. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. And so. Yeah.
Frank, I'm wondering whether all the money's coming from the efforts of the Australia Council itself, or whether the Commonwealth's putting in any new money.
All the things that I've just mentioned to date are all from what the Australia Council is doing. It's all from the existing Australia Council budget.
Good job then.
So obviously we are also doing a whole lot of other work, which is trying to work out exactly what the opportunities lie within the whole of economy packages that the government's issued, and how that relates to and can assist the arts and cultural sector. So we have been in contact with most multi-funded organisations in the first instance, trying to get some detailed data from everyone, in particular around what the possibilities of accessing the JobKeeper program would be, and what impact that might have on their capacity to, I suppose, work their way through this. The impact of the pandemic, but also how that money also gets directly to individual artists. We're also trying to work out, and we've got some people, we've engaged a person who's pretty good on this kind of stuff to give us some initially internal advice, and hopefully we'll be able to put up on our website fairly soon, around how the JobKeeper program also works for independents, sole traders, self-employed, and casuals, because that's also part of the JobKeeper program. And so, in a way, if people are trying to access the JobKeeper and the JobSeeker or other programs the government's put out there, we'd like to sort of get any feedback people might have around that as well. So if you've applied or tried to register and you've found that it's been difficult, or if you have registered and it's working for you, if you could just drop us a line, that'd be great, just for us to get a handle on how it's working. But our estimates are, there could be a significant impact of the JobKeeper program, in particular for the arts and cultural sector, both for organisations but also for the casuals and self-employed and sole traders through that program.
Frank, Julianne Schultz has got a follow-up question for you from the funding topic.
Yep.
Where are you, Julianne? Come in.
My audio. There we go. Sorry.
There you go.
Hear me now? Yeah. Okay.
Hi,
Thanks so
Julianne.
much, Frank. Thank you so much for doing this and for the enormous amount of work, obviously, that's gone into it under difficult circumstances. I just wondered whether there's any conversation going on with the Commonwealth Government about further sort of industry support, as is happening in so many other sectors. I mean, in addition to, you're obviously operating at the level of, key organisations and to some degree individual artists, but I'm just wondering whether there's anything else happening at a bigger sort of structural level, given the sort of decimation that's happened, especially in the live performing areas.
So every week, on a weekly basis, together with the Office for the Arts, we are convening a roundtable with a whole range of organisations from the sector, where there are government representatives like from the ATO and other places. And so that people can talk about issues that arise and hopefully get that fed back into government's thinking and consideration. I think people need to rest assured that the Australia Council and Adrian, our CEO in particular, is in a daily contact with the Office of the Arts and the Minister's Office, right? Talking about I think everyone's. How can I say? I think everyone is aware of the impact and trying to work out the best way to support that is something that's an ongoing conversation, Julianne. And also, the work being done by a whole range of people, peak organisations in the sector, not only apprises us of what the potential impact are, but you can rest assured that they're getting through to government as well. And some of those organisations are members of that roundtable conversation that happens on a weekly basis. As you'd appreciate, I can't go into detail around some of those things as a statutory agency of government, but rest assured, that I think everyone's really, really aware of how deep and hard this is.
Great, thank you.
Michelle Katevsky, where are you? Hello, Michelle. No?
Maybe Robin there.
Yes. Robin.
Hi, Robin from Rebus Theatre on Ngunnawal country in Canberra. Just wanted to ask about the Create strand of funding. Is that
Yes.
just for projects which can be completed while social distancing is still in place? Or is it available for projects which which can only be completed once social distancing is over and therefore would have to have open-ended timelines?
Yeah. So basically, what we're saying is that it's to create, to keep making artistic work and/or develop creative responses in this time of disruption. So it could be, excuse me. It could be to keep working on existing work that was being developed. It could be for new work and creative and innovative projects that build community participation, connection and cohesion, through this period of time, but also post COVID. So it is fair, it's quite open, to be honest, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah. So it can sort of be something that's an immediate response, that you want to work on something that you put online in the next 6 weeks, after you get the money. Or it could be someone who says, we want to work on this project which explores all these issues and will happen once we think we're through the end of social distancing, as a project which will quickly try and, I suppose, rebuild cohesion and all those things that might need to take place after that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Michelle, you're there now.
I am. I figured out how to work it. Frank, I don't know if I followed. I understand the 4-year funding outcomes of the 70% for 90 odd. Did you say something about the currently funded 4-year orgs?
Yep, I did. So almost all of, there's a few exceptions, but almost all the current 4-year funded organisations will receive funding in 2021, which will be at roughly 70% of the amount they've received in 2020.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now I've got Miles from Word Travels.
Hello, it's Miles here, and in Gadigal land in Dulwich Hill, and good to see all of you here. I just have a question around the ADAPT grant. What sorts of outcomes and reporting, requirements will be a part of that application, considering it's about exploring new models and an example I could think of is embedding some streaming into your website, for example, or those sorts of things. What could you talk a bit more about that?
Sure. Basically, a project like that would be something that could be submitted to that stream. It could be. It's pretty. Once again, we've made them try to make them as broad as possible. So it could be about skills and career development that someone thinks they need to undertake to sort of work their way not only through this period, but so when it comes out the other side, they're better positioned. Same as an organisation that might want to, inverted commas, do some business development work to position themselves at the end through this and past that. But it could be about different ways of connecting and working collaboratively and increasing your digital capability and capacities.
And what kind of reporting requirements would come after that, I guess?
There would be, the reporting requirements would be pretty simple, I think. For all these programs, there will be, well, except for Survive, the other two streams, there would be an acquittal process, which is not overly onerous. So I don't think the Australia Council's acquittal processes are overly onerous. There'd have to be an acquittal of the amount the funds were spent on the project, which is the usual thing. but those projects in both the adapt and the create stream can be for a very short period of time, or could take, could be for projects that someone might say that will take us 10 months, 12 months, even longer to complete. So in our guidelines, we'll be saying that the project could take up to 2 years to complete. So, from the proposed start date. Yep.
Thanks, Frank. Daryl Buckley.
Hi, thank you, Frank. It's Daryl from the Illusion Ensemble Kulin Nation in Melbourne. So, Frank, I've just got a question about the Australia advocacy to the federal government with respect to JobKeeper program, because I think it's particularly difficult for many artists, collectives and projects and organisations that are not funded on a regular basis to be able to demonstrate a 30% sort of shortfall between one year and another. So I'm just wondering, is there any kind of conversations you've got at the moment with federal government that might give a clue as to how they might assess the impacts on our sector in that regard?
We are in conversations with them almost on a daily basis, to be honest. And so if there are specific issues that you've confronted, if possible, if you could just drop me even an email to say, look, I tried to register and these were the things that were said to us, or we looked through the guidelines and this was a challenge for us. I mean, what we could possibly do, what we could do is then raise them ourselves directly with representatives of the ATO and other agencies that are actually delivering those programs.
Yeah.
Because I understand that there might be issues around also, how can I put it, one of the examples that was given to me earlier today by someone was someone who's just received a project grant as an individual practitioner, but it's actually for a collective project. So the grant was for, I think if I remember off the top of my head, for about 25 grand. But that 25 is going to then be dispersed to provide funds to a range of other collaborating artists. That impacts even on getting, the way that people, even for the job seeker program, because all of a sudden this person's got 25 grand sitting in the bank account, if you get the drift. So they're the kind of issues that, the more we're across it, the more that we can raise them directly and see if we can get some traction about changing some of those.
Okay, thank you.
I think we all need to be clear. I think it is clear to a large extent that the government is trying to ensure that as much money gets out to people through those programs. But obviously, when things get structured, they may structure them in a way that has unintended structural blockages. And if we come across those, we're more than happy to raise them and see whether we can sort of, get those to be fixed in a sense. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Frank. Monica.
Unmute. Hi, Frank, and hi, everyone. So, Monica Kane here from Community Arts. Hey, Frank, in Boorloo, Perth. Frank, a couple of questions. First of all and you may have mentioned this already, so I apologise if I've missed it, but the resilience program and those areas, how will they be assessed, first of all, given the quick turnaround? That's the first question.
Sure. They'll be fundamentally internally assessed by a process we'll put in place inside the council. And if we think we need industry advice, we may go and seek industry advice, which is basically we might go out to a couple of people who are experts in certain areas and ask them to give us their sense of what the applications look like as well. But to get the turnaround quickly, we just need to put in place different processes.
Okay, Pippa. Pippa Bailey.
Thank you. Hi, Frank. I'm on Wongal land in the Eora Nation. I just have two very quick things. One is that I've missed what happened to the funding round that ended in Feb. I just wanted clarity on that. And then the second thing was that I'm just really interested in I know this is primarily about funding, but I'm really interested in any conversation that's being had about audience and communities and the sort of a different kind of advocacy that might be emerging.
Sure. Okay. So on the first one, as we speak and while we're working on all this, assessment processes around the current February round are taking place. They'll be finished by early next week. We'll be making the announcements around those grants programs as soon as we lock all that in. So February was in train, and we decided we were going to go ahead with it, even though we're in the middle of assessments. So notifications will go out around them by the end of April. On the second one, I'm not really clear what the question is, Pip. So a different advocacy around audiences and communities. Is that what it?
Yeah, I'm just interested in whether there's been any, and understandably if not, but whether there's been any conversation about how we reach, you know, because so much has been cancelled, obviously audiences are receiving things online, but there's a very different, a different cultural conversation emerging about the role of arts now. So I just was wondering whether there'd been any talk about that.
Sure. Well, there's two things. One is internally at the Australia Council, we are doing a little bit of research on what is the potential impact of the moments of, you know, fundamentally lockdown, and what will be the potential impact on audiences and participation once the lockdown stops. The assumption that it'll just, how can I say, the switch goes on, you know, everyone stay at home, switch goes on, everyone go out of home, and everything will go back to the way it was, I think is, how can I put it, maybe not that simple. Obviously, the question around what is the changed nature of the interaction around arts and culture in this period of time, there are a lot of examples of people trying to work out how that changes in predominantly in a digital space. And I think there's examples all over the place, and hopefully through some of the ADAPT program we've put out there and some others being offered by different states and territories, there may be elements of that, you know, will give light to different modes of engagement. Just generally, I think that, you know, outside of what the Australia Council has been doing and fundamentally what a lot of people in the sector have been doing, I think that, you know, the sense of what's happening, you know, the significance of what arts and culture means to people's everyday life has been given more space than I think in the past, you know, and there's been enough media coverage and, you know, through, you know, how can I put it, you know, digital media, print media, you know, television reports and stuff like that. So in a sense, I think it, you know, is more out there than I would have been in the past. But then again, you know, we're competing in an we're in an environment where there's just so much that's going on. It's difficult to, how can I put this? You know, I think people will start to feel the impact the more the lockdown goes on. And, you know, how can I put this? I mean, I'd be really interested at some point to get a sense of what the streaming rate of something like Spotify and some of the others is currently running at during this period outside of streaming services on, you know, television and other platforms. But then we get to the old chestnut of what does that mean fundamentally for Australian content and Australian artists being able to forge themselves and sustain themselves during that period. Don't know if that answered the question. I just went on a rave. I just realised, sorry.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Frank.
Okay.
Harmony.
Oh, sorry, I just asked a couple of questions in the chat. How's everyone going? So 2 questions. One is, will the new resilience funding cover any equipment? And the second question is, will Australia Council lobby the LNP government to establish its own federal arts minister, or perhaps adopt a national arts policy and strategy, considering it doesn't have one currently?
Sure. On the first question, if the equipment is an integral part of delivering the project, then the Australia Council is with all projects. That's a legitimate cost of delivery. So it really depends on how can I put it, on what the project looks like and why the equipment is essential to delivering that project. So I don't think that's a blockage in some way. I assume, in some instances, building digital capability may require, how can I put it, certain equipment enhancements that people might need. So it's a question of how that fits into the project. On the second one, we are a statutory agency of government, so technically we don't lobby. So the issue of, the only thing I would say about the question of a minister, for the arts, is our minister is still called the minister. He's called the minister. He holds the title he held before, which was the minister for, cyber security arts, and there's one other thing that I can't remember off the top of my head. And our relationship with that minister has been maintained ever since the change of the machinery of government.
Frank,
in terms of cultural policy, sorry, yes, Sam?
I was just going to say, you may not, lobbying may not be the appropriate word, but as an independent agency, you're charged with giving the minister full and frank advice.
Yes.
Strongly.
And we do. But we may not, but obviously there might be moments where we give advice to government, but we will not make that public, to be blunt. Yeah. So that's the difference between being a statutory agency of government and being a wholly independent organisation.
Yes.
In regard to the second one around a cultural policy or the development of a cultural policy or not, I mean, there are mixed views around that. I think that, at a personal level, some of you know me, would know that I think the question of how you develop a cultural policy which actually has a sense of ownership that goes across the political and public discourse is a crucial thing. We have seen examples where various governments, both at state and Commonwealth level, have developed cultural policies which have fallen as soon as there may be a change of government. And in a way, that is a space I don't think anyone really wants to be in. So the notion of what is, I suppose, a cultural framework which is accepted by and seen as part of normality of anyone that gets into power, I think is the real challenge for all of us, to be honest.
Thanks very much. Lenine.
Yes. Hi, friends.
Hey, Lenine.
Hey, I'm just wondering about how close Australia Council become friends with the ABC. I'm noticing little things like the incredible broadcast yesterday afternoon by ABC to explain things to children. I'm noticing schools and the education department looking for content, and a lot of it's worksheets that we're supposed to print out. And we have this massive, incredible sector with so much skill in that space, but limited access to other than what we can broadcast. Hold on, sweetheart. Just hold on 1 second. Just what we can broadcast. Here we are, just homeschooling. What we can all, I don't know, we're making a kite or something with no wind. Anyway, yeah, I guess I was just thinking, I've been thinking about broadcasting in general, and the ABC got a big run on, they can hear you now. The ABC did a great report on the symphony, you know, the orchestras. So I just wondered about the relationship with the ABC or other broadcasters and even the Screen Australia conversations, how once this first phase moves and we get money out, hold on, Luca, how that strategic conversation goes down.
Sure. Look, we have ongoing conversations with, our sister agencies like Screen Australia and a whole range of others, and how we can try and collaborate is something we talk about a lot. With the ABC and broadcasters, the relationship is, I think, solid, to be honest. The question of them broadcast, we are not, how can I say, we are not creators of content for them, the Australia Council per se. We have at times flagged things for them and that they have taken up in a way. But how can I put this? I think there's also a question of how some organisations also try and, outside of the Australia Council, arts and cultural organisations, try and forge some of those relationships at a local level with the ABC as well, because we know they've got it across the platform. I mean, the education space is an interesting one, to be honest, Lenny. They are so state driven that it's almost what is the relationship at state levels with education departments, and how online learning content and delivery is happening currently, and what role artists or arts organisations may be able to play in that. But that is, predominantly, to be honest, a state conversation, because even though notionally there is national curriculum, I think we're all aware that it is not as national as we'd all thought what national means.
Frank, while you're on the topic of the states, could you just give us a bit of an update on where your discussions are with the state arts departments and ministers?
Sure. So two things around that. One is we've set up a group between the state and our state agencies and ourselves to exchange information as quickly as we can around responses to COVID-19. So when we were doing the thinking around our resilience program, we convened a meeting with all the states and territories to sort of say, this is what we're thinking. How does it complement or, in a sense, augment what's happening in some state jurisdictions? Some state jurisdictions moved faster than we did. Others are still working on programs. So that it's a pretty good conversation that I think, to be honest, Anne, that we're trying to pull together. There's been a lot of conversations also with the states around, not just the 4-year funding stuff, but more generally around multi-funded organisations and what the impact is, and what the spill outside of the multi-funded organisations looks like as well for their sectors, that can be fed into our modelling, so that when we're talking to the Office for the Arts and to the government generally, we've got a better handle on that. So I think that relationship is strong. I mean, there's an interesting element which is more difficult to get a clear handle on. Is there more and more local governments also working on initiatives, packages and support for the arts and arts and cultural sector in their local communities? Obviously some of the larger capital cities, both Sydney and Melbourne, have put out very specific and targeted programs to support their arts and cultural sectors.
Lost your volume, Frank.
From using their venues, a whole range of things like that. So, that's much more difficult in the sense for us to coordinate, but hopefully through the states we can get a better handle on that as well. And as I said last time, we've also got David Sharp working for us to do some initial analysis around packages and what they look like. So hopefully, working on this for us to do some work. So once we hope at some point to be able to put that up and make that more public as well.
I was just, I mean, mostly I was thinking about the immediate situation where you'll have a whole lot of organisations who didn't make it in the 4-year round. And so there needs to be real scope for them to seek support in their states without there having to be partnership requirements, and, you know, like some of those earlier things you might have asked for and loosen up a bit. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in the process today. We're having conversations with each of the states and territories about the details of the outcomes of those processes. Because everything's been shifted around so much, I couldn't sit down and do it earlier. And in those conversations, you know, there's how can I put it? We'll be talking about individual cases and what is a way forward and how we might be able to assist, and they might be able to assist some of those organisations. And yes,
they're live conversations, and so
good.
You know, the thing of being able to provide funding through 2021 is also to assist some of that transition work, hopefully with the states and territories as well.
Excellent. Monica, you had something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Frank, just going back to the discussion about JobKeeper and how AusCo, I guess, unpacking and understanding how that might work for the sector. We've got, say, 10 contractors who are essentially sole traders that we're continuing to honour the contract at the moment because of the situation. And I'm trying to model whether it's best, because that will have a flow-on effect, obviously, later down the track. I'm trying to work out whether it's best for them to apply for JobKeeper or whether, and I'm just wondering if you had any discussions with other organisations that are in a similar situation. We're trying to make sure we do the best for individual contractors and independent artists, you know, in the immediate situation. Have you got any advice or examples?
Well, I don't know them off the top of my head, Monica, but just from what I know, it would be good if you wanted to drop me an email with the specific details, because we could have a closer look.
Yeah.
Is this that if the person's, you know, primary source of income has been through, you know, a relationship with an agency, and then there may be scope around that for the agency to receive the funds and pay to that sole trader.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the flip side, that sole trader could also apply to JobKeeper and sort of say, well, my income has been this and it's dropped off by this amount. You know, I've lost 30%, all that kind of stuff, because it's. And so it is almost, to be blunt, a case-by-case issue that needs to be looked at. The reality is this, that, you know, if you are the ones that register and say for these people, excuse me, you get the 1,500 and you pay the 1,500 to the contractor. But from your organisational perspective, you also have to see how that is going to alleviate some of, you know, also how it alleviates some of your cost pressures at the same time. So, you know, that's what it has to be, a case-by-case thing. My gut instinct is I think the contractors should apply themselves as sole traders, to be honest. But if you send through the detail, I can have a closer look at it.
Okay. Thanks, Frank.
Yep.
And Frank, you just reassure people that you understand the huge problem about your income's dropped 30% when the income's so random in this sector, and that you're advocating on behalf of people over that?
Oh yeah. That's one of the key issues for us, and it's also one of the issues around what does regular casual employment over the last 12 months really mean.
Yes.
So, you know,
just wanted.
It's regular, you know, 3 times in a year, 12 times in a year, 6 times in a year, you know, all that kind of stuff. They're they're live conversations, Anne, and like I said, the more examples of, if people apply, try to register and find that these become issues, the more we are across them, the better.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to start wrapping up. There are some other comments and questions on the chat page, Frank, which you might have a look at when you've got a minute, or get someone in the council to have a look at.
Sure.
If there are sensible answers, if you could perhaps feed those into Arts Front, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
I need to tell people that there's a full program of Little Lunch Online next week, and that program will be sent out shortly, but put it in your diary. And note that daylight saving will change the time for all sorts of people. So it's 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, which is what it'll be by Monday. Just one other thing to cope with in the middle of it. We need to thank all the people who have who've come on today, and also, since we started, it's been a bit of a mucky week for everybody, and I imagine it's not going to get any better for all sorts of people once we've hung up here and you've read your emails. However, I think that being able to connect and bringing people together is enormously important, so that we have an ongoing sense that there is a sector, and that people are here for each other. So I really need to thank Feral Arts, including Elliot as well as Norman Sarah, for their enormous energy that goes into making it possible for all of us to be together. So tune in on Monday. Thanks to everybody, and have a good weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, it's okay. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Okay, bye.